We ranked the best player from every team for last season, and we're going to do that again later on this upcoming season. But for now, we're looking straight up at the top 30 players in the NBA. I wanted to make this video for a while now, but I really thought I should wait until the playoffs and finals were over to rank these guys in the top few spots a little better. And it's a good thing I waited. And this is probably a video that I'll do every offseason because a lot changes in a year. And I will say that making these rankings were tough. The top 10 was easy, but figuring out who to leave out of the video and who just made the top 30 was the hard part. So to explain my reasoning for who I left out, we're gonna really quick look at the top few guys who didn't make the list and why. Kristaps Porzingis has a chance to be top 30, but hasn't played basketball in over a year and a half, so it's going to take him a long time to get back to that point. Nikola Vucevic had a great regular season, but got shut down in the playoffs. Devin Booker didn't make the top 30, and I know that's going to get a lot of people angry, but all we know from him is that he can score. He's not a great defender, wasn't a good teammate to DeAndre Ayton this year, and hasn't led his team to wins. Donovan Mitchell almost made the list, but he barely got edged out by a couple other guys. D'Angelo Russell also barely missed the cut, and Karl Anthony Towns ended up in the 31 or maybe 32 spot when it came down to it. But comment if you disagree with any of these. Hopefully they'll make more sense once we see the rest of the rankings though. Starting with number 30, Jrue Holiday. I almost completely forgot about Jrue because he's been so underrated, but he surprisingly turned into a great offensive player to combine with one of the best perimeter defenses in the NBA. Hopefully he will get traded so he can get more recognition on a better team though, because he's definitely an all-star level player. 29, Khris Middleton. Khris has always been one of those guys that we expected would break out eventually, and he did this year, becoming a first-time All-Star, and also played great in the playoffs alongside Giannis. Until it came to the Raptors series where he couldn't get much going and only averaged 13 a game. Number 28, CJ McCollum. McCollum's another guy we expected to break out, and after this past regular season, I was disappointed that he still hadn't. But that's because he was saving it for the playoffs, where alongside Dame, he really came out and played like a superstar player, and that's why he ranks slightly higher than Khris. 27, Pascal Siakam. It may be controversial to put Pascal in the top 30 in his first year as a near-star player, but I don't know, I think he earned it, because not only did he put up 17 and 7 in the regular season, but he came up even bigger as being the second option to leading the Raptors to a championship. He did have some off games, but overall played great in every series, even when being matched up with the Warriors and a guy like Draymond Green. 26, Bradley Beal. With John Wall out for most of the season, Bradley Beal seemingly took his game to the next level this year, putting up 25, 5, and 5. And even though the Wizards were bad all year long, Beal's only just turned 26, and if he can continue to step up, he can be the leader of their rebuild. 25, Draymond Green. People forget how good Draymond Green is and what he really brings to the Warriors. He's the most versatile player in the league that can guard all 5 positions and is easily a top 5 defender in the NBA. And along with that, I hope to see his offensive game come back to what it used to be, with Klay and KD not playing for the Warriors for at least the first half of the season. 24, LaMarcus Aldridge. I'm not as high on LA as other people are, or as I probably still should be, but either way, he definitely deserves to be here. The man's 33, but still nearly just as good of a scorer as he's ever been, but has stayed as a top power forward and a threat in the regular and postseason for nearly 10 years. 23, Rudy Gobert. People don't see Gobert for as good as he is, and I think he's underrated across the league. He makes the top 30 and Donovan Mitchell doesn't because of how important he is to the team. He's not going to be Utah's centerpiece or star player ever, but he does just as much for them. Besides just his NBA best shot blocking, even though he's not the best actual scorer, he does more than enough for the offense to make up for it by setting screens, running the pick and roll to perfection, and always being there for putbacks, which is how he still managed to average almost 16 a game. 22, Ben Simmons. Ben should be higher, but I refuse to do that until he gets a jump shot. Number 21, Kyle Lowry. In the past few years, Lowry was seen as a bad star for the Raptors, but that's because this whole time he was in the wrong role. He wasn't supposed to be a star player, which is why he's worked out so much better in this new role this year behind Kawhi Leonard. As a guy that isn't heavily relied on to have a big game, but there's always a possibility that he can. Number 20, Chris Paul. It didn't take long after getting his $159 million contract for people to turn on CP3 and realize that it was a horrible mistake. And it seems like the Rockets are starting to realize that too. Don't get me wrong, he ranks in at number 20 because he's still a top 6 or 7 point guard in the league, but his game has clearly declined in recent years, and I'd find it hard to believe Houston ever finds a trade for him. 19, DeMar DeRozan. The better the Raptors did this year, the worse it made DeMar look after their trade, which is why he fell down a couple spots in these rankings from where I think he would have ended up. But DeMar and Kawhi switched spots, the Spurs went out in the first round, and the Raptors won the championship. And sure, this Raptors team was much better with Siakam and Gasol, but even without them, it's easy to see just how big of a difference Kawhi made. Number 18 goes to Kemba Walker. Kemba's a weird one because while I think he's proven to be a top 5 point guard, he still barely ever played a playoff game, and that's part of the reason he doesn't rank any higher. But he had to rank higher than CP3, Kyle Lowry, and Ben Simmons, because if he were to be on a playoff team, he would have made a much bigger impact than all three of those guys. I'm still desperately hoping he leaves the Hornets, but if not, this conversation won't matter because he probably will never make the playoffs again. 17, Blake Griffin. I think it's safe to say that this year Blake had the best year of his career, where he finally returned to being a superstar level player. To put his regular season into perspective, this year he averaged more points than Kyrie Irving, more assists than Stephen Curry, and made more pull-up threes than Bradley Beal. He's brought his game a long way since first debuting in the league, and now all the Pistons need to do is desperately get him more help and make sure he stays healthy. 16, Victor Oladipo. Oladipo's a top 3 shooting guard in the league, and even though he's injured, I'm sure he'll come back just as good next year. And some people might be thinking Victor should be ranked higher than 16, but he's got a lot of competition ahead of him. So this is where one of the league's better two-way players ends up for now. Number 15, Russell Westbrook. I know a lot of people probably have Russ top 10. I know a lot of people probably have Russ maybe top 10. And people are going to think that I only put Westbrook here because I'm hating on him, since I've criticized his game in the past. But without being biased, I think this is where he should really end up. He puts up great performances and won an MVP, but when it comes down to it, the Thunder have only won 4 playoff games since KD left the team, so I really can't justify putting him too much higher. 14, Jimmy Butler. No doubt that Butler has had attitude problems in the past, and that may be one of his weaknesses, even though he did have a point to be upset in Minnesota. But he's a top two-way player and a great leader, and showed both of those things for the 76ers in the postseason, which is why they should do everything they can to re-sign him, and hope that he can take his offensive game to the next level next year. But speaking of great two-way players that took their offensive game to the next level, number 13 is Paul George. And he did exactly that. He was already one of the better two-way players in the NBA, but came out this season putting up a surprising 28 a game. But along with Westbrook, they nearly got swept by the Blazers, which was disappointing and why he doesn't rank any higher. Number 12, Kyrie Irving. In my eyes, I think it's clear that Kyrie proved that he's a Robin and not a Batman. His bad leadership became the Celtics' biggest story this season, when the team really had high hopes, and that really hurt his reputation. So I think it'll be a huge mistake if the Nets let D'Angelo Russell walk so they can sign Kyrie. The only thing that would make that slightly okay is if they landed a second max or near max player. Number 11, Joel Embiid. Embiid had a near MVP level regular season, putting up 27 and 13 on the year, which made him clearly look like the best center in the league. But the postseason told a different story. He played great and battled injuries, but wasn't able to take over games as much as I was expecting him to, which is something we can only hope he improves on for next year. But with all that, it's why I feel number 10 is the best center in the league with Nikola Jokic. The man really came out like a star and proved to be a real superstar player this year. He's got one of the best all-around games in the league and creates opportunities for himself and his teammates all game long, with or without the ball. He doesn't play like a traditional superstar and probably never will, but I think at this point there's no arguing that he really is one. 9, Damian Lillard. There's no doubt in my mind that Dame has surpassed Kyrie Irving as the second best point guard in the league. With how good he's consistently shown that he is in the postseason, how he can be the first option on a team leader, and with his clutch shots, it's no question that Dame's earned this spot inside of the top 10 players in the NBA. Number 8, Klay Thompson. All of these injuries have really complicated the Warriors' future, but I'm just looking forward to KD changing teams so Klay can go back to playing like his old self again. He had 30 points by the time the third quarter came around in Game 6 of the finals before going out with that knee injury, and I think when he's healthy, those are the kind of games we can expect for him to have all the time next season. 7, James Harden. Even though he's been in MVP talks all year and is the best scorer in the league right now, he doesn't end up ranked in the top 5 because of his defense and his play style. He's a great individual player, especially when his entire team is centered around him, but that system doesn't work in the playoffs and he's not a great two-way player. Number 6, Kevin Durant. Alright, Durant was in my opinion the best player in the world before his Achilles injury, but with how that affects players' futures, I had to drop him down pretty far. Now there's really no telling how good he's going to be when he comes back, but I couldn't put an injured Durant any higher, and I should have possibly put him down further on the list, but instead I just settled for right outside the top 5. Number 5, LeBron James. Last season was terrible for LeBron's career, and him once again driving his team to trade the entire roster doesn't help his case. But the man still did average just as good of numbers as he always does. I wanted to rank him higher, but his effort on defense this year definitely drops him down. Number 4, Anthony Davis. AD is finally on a playoff team, and depending on how that goes and how much he helps LA, he could possibly move up to being the second best player in the league after this season. But without the opportunity to prove himself yet, we'll keep him at number 4. And yes, he ranks slightly higher than LeBron for his ability and efforts on both ends of the floor. 3, Giannis. Giannis will probably win MVP, but these playoffs have shown that his game still has a ways to go. In games 1 and 2 of their series against the Raptors, Pascal Siakam guarded him and they won both games. In games 3, 4, 5, and 6, Kawhi was put on Giannis and the Raptors swept the rest of the series. It also helped that the Raptors were double and triple teaming him down low anytime he drove to the basket, and they forced him to play on the perimeter. And that proved how much he desperately needs an outside shot, and how his playmaking ability could really use work this offseason. Number 2, Steph Curry. I'm sure a lot of people will say Giannis should have had this spot and Curry should be number 3 or even a lot further back, but I'm still betting on Steph. After those weaknesses that I just pointed out about Giannis, I just can't rank him over Curry. I mean, Steph made plays out of double teams on nearly every play against Toronto. He knows how to do that, stay composed, to get teammates involved, and take over a game. And I think he played better than a lot of people thought he would without Durant, and I think that this season, as the Warriors' main star player again, he'll prove that this is where he deserves to be, even with his inferior defense. Number 1, Kawhi Leonard. This one should be no question. I mean, Kawhi's a robot, and he's really the best defender in the league by a long shot. We saw his defense on LeBron in 2013, and like we mentioned earlier, his defense on Giannis. He can slow down anyone in the league, and even though it would have been interesting to see how much he could have affected Kevin Durant, we'll never get to see that. But you combine this defensive ability with this year's playoffs, this shot, 2 finals MVPs, and his 27 points a game, and it makes Kawhi Leonard an easy choice for the best player in the world right now. And that's gonna wrap things up. These videos always get a lot of people's thoughts going in the comments, so definitely comment yours down below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll catch you next video.